Wow. Oh, that hurts my heart. Oh my gosh. How's it going, my Saab friends? My name is Gary and this is my channel Weakest to Weeks. If you're a first time viewer, I appreciate you clicking on the video and definitely consider subscribing. If you're new to this channel, this is my 2008 Saab 9.3 Aero 2.8 liter turbo V6, 6-speed manual transmission. It is the front wheel drive car, 355 horsepower, 420 pound-feet of torque. Whole playlist out there if you're new to the channel. Feel free to check it out. Now, I have done a ton of DIY videos, especially with this particular car throughout the years. However, one thing that honestly I will admit I'm not good at, nor do I like doing, and that is body work. So that's something that this car has needed since I purchased it in 2017. And well, I'll quit rambling, I'll flip the camera around and show you exactly what I'm talking about. You ready to get to work? Good man. All right, so if you're new to the platform, or maybe even if you're a longtime Saab enthusiast, you may or may not know that these Saabs, at least the new Gen 9.3s, are plagued with some very specific rust issues. Now for me, I do live in the United States, specifically Ohio. We have winters, they put rock salt and some other harsh chemicals down to combat freezing roads, and unfortunately that leads to rusty vehicles. So that's not exclusive to the United States. There's plenty of my friends across the pond that deal with the exact same thing. So there's some very specific areas on these cars that rot out. One very common thing, regardless of where you live, is basically the front subframe, whether it's the cross-wheel drive, the all-wheel drive, as you will, or the front-wheel drive like this particular car. The front subframes are notorious for rusting out. How the AC drains drip down onto the subframe, eventually those rot out, so you're not limited to being in an area that gets winter to have that rust out. Down here, the inner fenders, and actually on the passenger side, I'll link a video in the description, but I did replace a fender specifically because I got some rock chips here that started to rust, and then what happens is this plastic liner, some junk gets in behind here, rots away, and then this rust typically from the backside out. But fortunately, that's just a bolt-off, bolt-on affair, and that's pretty simple to replace, provided you can find a matching color. Probably the worst part about these new Gen 9.3s where they rust out is down here in the lower quarter. Same situation with the front. This time it gets in this wheel liner in the back here. You get leaves and other crap in here. Holds the moisture, rusts these inside out. And then also these wheel wells. And for whatever reason, so you do see it on both sides, but I will say it does seem more common on the passenger side where the fuel filler is. So I don't know if there's a lack of rust proofing or what, but unfortunately, that is what has plagued my car. Now, when I purchased this vehicle, I bought it out of Cleveland, Ohio. I want to say it was in 2017, and while it was in great shape then, it did have some early signs of rust bubbling, and then now after driving it through various winters, and I want to say the past 2 or 3 years, I've actually parked it over winters to kind of prevent this from getting worse, but nonetheless, this area, this is definitely not a, I would say, real bad situation, because a lot of times you get straight up holes. This is still pretty solid, but it's definitely something that needs addressed, and you can see where the bumper, this lower fascia, meets this metal lip. That is also rusted, and then it's just going to continue to spread and get worse. But you can see this section of the quarter panel perfectly fine, and then it starts to bubble up pretty darn bad. Looking closer, we can peel back some of this weather seal, and there you go. It has more bubbling, and then it's splitting here. So this, if I pushed hard enough, no doubt I would poke right through that. And then this lip is incredibly brittle, and you can see the paint is splitting. Now, what does that mean for this car? No, it is not at the end of its life, not at the end of the road per se, but I'm at the point where I want to get this fix in. I am not going to be doing it myself. I am passing the torch off to a professional. There's a couple ways around this. No, you're not going to replace the entire quarter panel like you frequently see on these crash repair videos on YouTube, fixing those fancy supercars. In this case, they do make patch panels that you can splice in, comes in here. You just cut what you need, because normally the rust is isolated in this area and down here. You don't frequently see it up top. So these patch panels are basically this body line and down. and then to like around here. But before that, I'm actually gonna try to save some money in the labor. I can deliver the car just like this. However, I'm gonna have to pay them to remove the rocker panel, remove the rear fascia, remove the inner wheel liner. Instead, I am opting to do that, bring the car a little bit disassembled. That way, by the time they get it, they can just go ahead and have access to everything they need to start repairing it. But I will include the body panels, and then I'm thinking once they fix the rust, I'll go back, possibly reattach this stuff or work with a painter, because that's another specialist that's involved, and then they're going to paint and then of course blend this section. So without further ado, I'm going to start removing the rocker panel, that inner wheel liner, and this rear fascia. So before I even begin, I can already hear some people complain about not showing some of this stuff in depth. Now, my friends, don't you worry. The inner wheel liner, I have a video I'll link in the description, in-depth removal of that. Same thing for the rear fascia, removing that when I installed the knockoff Hirsch diffuser. But the rocker panel, when I did the front fender replacement, I only showed partially removing it, so I promise in this video I'll show the complete removal of that. But everything else, wheel liner, wheel, rear fascia, we're gonna breeze through that real quickly. For this rocker, pretty simple. We'll start with a 8mm ratchet. One right there. That's pretty loose. Then we'll go to the front. What helps is if you turn the wheel a little bit, then you get a bit more access to this bolt right there, and then this one right there. Now, crawling underneath this rocker panel, every so often we'll have some plastic push pins. So just kind of grab your hand here, pull down, and then it'll drop right out. Make sure you have a nice little hardware pile so you don't lose any of the hardware when you go to reassemble. Here's where we're at so far with the rocker panel hardware. We have the 3 8mm screws, and then these 6 plastic push pins or push rivets, whatever you want to call them. Now, one thing I didn't notice because these things were so dirty, technically by me just yanking down on them is not the proper way to remove it. What you want to do is get a screwdriver. Notice here in the center, there's a small hole. You push in, and what that does is it releases some tension on this, and then you can pull down. Now, these clips, the lower section of the rocker panel, it's all very stout, so the way I did it, just kind of tugging on them, didn't hurt anything. However, that technically wasn't the proper way to do it. And then to reinstall, what you need to do is have it like this, push them up into that rocker, and then just simply push the center section, and then that flares out this base, and then that's what really locks it into place. Go ahead, open both doors. What we need to do is remove part of the seal. Now, I'm not going to remove it completely. However, we need to get it out of this channel. So just kind of pull back, and once you get it started, it kind of just comes out the rest of the way. But what that does is it exposes a whole slew of T27 Torx screws that need removed. So we ended up having 6 T27 Torx screws, and now we're good to try to shimmy this rocker panel off. And we'll leave the doors partially open. And there is a spot in this fender where it clips into this rocker. And then this is kind of hard to capture on camera, but there is that little tab for this lower front fender section, and then this is where the rocker panel locks into that, and that's what we ended up shimmying out. And here's what we're left with, a hanging door seal that we need to tie up. And then now kind of exposes a bit more of the nastiness right there. Oh man, that is not good. Oh yeah, look at that. Wow. Oh, that hurts my heart. Oh my gosh. Seeing dollar signs to get this fixed, but it needs done. Carries over into there. Gosh, can't wait to hear the rust specialist reaction to that. All right, next up, I think we'll go ahead, jack this side up. We'll pull this wheel up, pull the wheel liner out, and then tackle that rear fascia. Here's what we're left with. Of course, just remove that rear fascia over there. I prefer to remove the taillights to get better access to these clips that the rear bumper goes into on both sides. Here is that problem child area, and looking closer, you can see there is some rust right here, some rust up in there. Don't know really the extent of it. Doesn't look too awfully terrible, but I'm wondering, this will probably have to get removed. And then in behind here, you can kind of see some rust. Not too awfully terrible. All that black stuff is Pour 15 paint over rust paint. And I ended up doing this down here, and I think that probably saved some of this as well. But I mean, this by far is the worst. I mean, you can obviously stick your finger through it, but the inner structure seems to be solid. It's just kind of this faceplate, and then back here is pretty solid. So I think that's also just kind of the cosmetic side of it. Everything else, not too terrible. There's a couple areas that I might have him grind down and treat. This is all very solid. It's primarily surface rust. So now I'm going to throw the wheel back on, kind of clean up the mess. I need to pack up the rocker panel, the rear fascia over on the other side. I need to put the wheel back on, the taillights back in, because the car is going to get driven over there. And then we'll see what the professional says about this and what's going to be involved with this project. Before I even decided to tear apart my 9.3, I did do some research to find the perfect person to fix the rust. Now, quickly, I learned that a lot of shops in my area in Columbus, Ohio will happily repair crash damage, anything from fender benders to more severe stuff. They'll gladly unbolt, rebolt parts, stretch things with frame machines, and get things back in order. But as soon as I mentioned rust, that was a big no-no, and the call ended. So it took a little while doing some digging in the deep interwebs, and I stumbled upon an old forum where somebody mentioned this guy named John, who lives outside of Columbus, Ohio, has a shop, goes by Auto Rust Specialist, and supposedly he is even into Saab. So I was very intrigued by this. I had a long phone conversation with him. He agreed. I was able to film some stuff, and just downright was a very enjoyable experience. I highly recommend him. And for what you see, if you are ever in the market to get your Saab fixed with rust repair, and you are local to Columbus, Ohio, I highly suggest reaching out to John to get it fixed. Or even if you have an older Saab and you just need replacement patch panels, I highly suggest supporting him. He's a very old school Saab enthusiast, a wealth of knowledge, and willing to share that knowledge. So without further ado, let me get you to when I met John and we got to tour his little shop.
Okay, today we're looking at a 72 Saab Sonett. Not only are we looking at the rear wheel tub, but you can see it turns around and becomes the sidewall of the engine compartment. Now, the most interesting thing about the 72 Sonett is this has actually 2 layers. So my repair work was to fabricate this layer, put in the hole for the brake line, and then underneath is another layer of metal, and the other layer comes down to about here. So you can see this has formed a really nice factory joint. I did a little patch here after I installed this piece here, and you can see also there's another one right here. That's a butt weld, and they're practically invisible. And I maintain the stock appearance of the line all the way down. So right in this area is 3 full layers of metal attaching to the inner firewall.
So what year is this?
72.
72.
It's 8/25/72. And I found a build date on the inside. Somebody was proud enough to sign their work.
Wow, that's awesome. So then you've done some work in the rear as well, right? Some work in the back.
Yes. Here I've made the front head pan to the trunk. That's a nice piece. Now what you really cannot see is you're looking at the axle housing. So when you look at it, totally in that area are 3 separate bulkheads.
Wow. So this was all rusted out when you got this vehicle?
Yeah, this is all original, and I'm able to duplicate that. And then here you can see weld lines where I was able to do fairly well and formed a new patch. And then I welded the shipping hooks or tow hooks back in place.
Okay. And then this panel, for example, you made that from scratch, right?
I made that from scratch.
You
That's
did all
correct.
the bead rolls and everything
Yeah.
in there. That's amazing. Wow. And then these are some of your pre-made patches that you have going. So is this an example of that panel
That's
that
correct.
you welded in there?
I made one, I might as well make 2 or 3. In this case, I made 4. Now these will resell.
And what gauge metal is
all
this?
18 gauge.
Yeah, that's nice and sturdy.
The factory was 20, so I use 18 gauge. Now let me pull this piece out. And then we'll turn it around in its proper orientation, or we'll just go down here and size it up where it belongs.
Okay, so this is a rocker
This
panel.
is the full-length rocker panel, and I've designed it with a little recess right here so that it will actually splice in
Wow.
to the original.
Look at that.
Okay.
That's quite the attention to detail.
Yeah.
And then you used what, like a metal brake and made all
I use
these
metal
bends.
brick. The recess here is made with a bead roller. Everything else is broken. I have my lines on the inside.
That's
And
amazing.
What's interesting about this piece, as I said, this is the weld line, and it's 1/2 an inch down from here. It'll splice right here. So that's the easiest to accommodate a full seam welding and then have a double overlap.
And then your plan is to sell these, or?
That's correct. These
Okay.
are available from Sweden, and I believe theirs is a 20 gauge, and they're very reasonably priced at $80 a piece.
Mm-hmm.
Mine are $300 a set, and that includes free shipping, which is a $60 value. So mine come in about $120.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. I can't believe you take a flat piece of metal, bend it up, bead roll it. I mean, that's just amazing.
Yeah, actually, all of this work here is really, and even the rocker panels, is pretty much considered metal shaping 101. This is something I could teach you to do in about an hour and a half.
Really?
Yes, that's first grade.
Oh, you got a lot of faith in me.
That's first grade metal work.
That looks amazing. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. Let me walk around this Sonnet. I definitely look forward to what you can work for on my new Gen 9.3. And if you need any Saab parts, I can get you in touch with John, and we can get you some metal panels. Or if you're local in the area, so his shop is in Groveport, Ohio, which is southeast of Columbus here. So if you're local, you may be able to get his hands on your Saab and do some rust repair.
The original, they're V4s and 2s, Sonnet 2s. V4 is indicative of the 4-cylinder engine.
Okay.
And the Sonnet 2 is a 3-cylinder engine.
Which one is this?
72, Sonnet 3.
Sonnet 3.
So we have a Sonnet 3, a V4, and a Sonnet 2. So that was a 3-cylinder engine. You had to, it was 2-cycle.
You mixed it.
You mixed it, 2-cycle. Valve open, valve closed. Closed combustion, open exhaust. Back, forth, 3-cylinder. And to compensate for the low power, there's a lever inside the cockpit that you have to decide before you start the car. I don't want freewheeling. I drive, I can rev downhill, rev uphill, or you can pull the lever and the car will coast downhill, providing that the momentum of the car is greater than the RPM of the engine. Wow.
I heard of the, what did you call that? The coasting, not coasting.
Freewheeling.
Freewheeling. I've heard of that on the Saab 96.
Exactly.
Okay, so same kind of thing. Okay.
The engineers were pretty smart. They were doing models 95, models 96, and the Sonnets are actually model 97. So the engineers got really smart and they started sharing sheet metal. So if you were to get an original NOS sheet metal trunk pan, it's actually for the 95, 96, and you cut it down for the 97 model. Floor pans were also repurposed. A wealth of parts were repurposed from the original 95, 96.
Yeah, these are such cool cars. And then the body is primarily fiberglass, right?
Yes. Fiberglass back half, which can be removed, and a lot of people do total ground up restorations. They'll remove the back half. They'll have just what they call the body shoe, and they'll blast and do the metal work on it, and then reassemble everything. That's a total restoration. This gentleman's going for a furbish, which is just fix all the rust you can find.
Wow. It's got like stainless drip rails and everything. And then are you rebuilding the engine on this one, or was that in decent shape?
Having a fairly prestigious Sonnet engine rebuilder. I believe his name's Bud Clark. He's well into his 80s, and he still rebuilds engine and transmissions.
So the engineering alone in this engine bay is pretty interesting. So the suspension, it has like a cross brace that ties it together, but then there's a cap. Is that a radiator cap?
The top brace is actually for the hot water, for the antifreeze. For the engine.
Interesting design.
So they've turned it into a cross brace as well as a filler.
It's got a massive ground strap. That's crazy. Is that louvers? Wow, it's got some like built-in louvers.
Yeah.
To like dissipate heat or something.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, got more over here.
Good airflow.
That's all metal. Wow. So then it's got that big like fiberglass clamshell that probably bolts to all this, right? I see the seals. This is honestly my first time getting up close to a Saab Sonett. I've seen them online, and kind of embarrassingly enough, I've never really driven one or seen one up close and personal.
I've got several layers
Is that the original interior out of this car?
Yeah. That's the only thing.
That's beautiful.
That's the only thing this needs.
Wow.
The interior.
I love that color. It's like a peanut butter.
Yeah. The interior reassembled. And a few mechanicals. Not many. Just a few.
Wow.
The earlier Sonnets, Sonnet 2s and the Sonnet V4s, had headlights mounted in the hood and the hood tipped up. This one has flip-up headlights and the hood does not tilt.
Is this the same color as that one? Or are they different? Because this...
he got a slight mismatch.
Okay, because this is kind of like a... I don't know what
California
you call it.
burgundy.
Okay, burgundy. That's kind of like a dark wine color,
Yeah.
kind of purplish, reddish.
And
This is
I had to
beautiful.
have it custom matched. And I used a piece of the original headlight bucket when I got it out. A piece of the side was original, unfaded, and you could easily get a color match. And then
Wow. So what are we looking at? Is this the V4?
that's the V4. Front wheel drive.
Wow. So where is the front axle on it? So the front axle is basically like right here. So the engine is kind of hanging out in front of the axle?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a small engine and there is still a decent amount of space, but there's a lot crammed in not a lot of space here. Wow. This is really cool. This is a beautiful Sonnet.
Still gotta kind of be careful. I haven't fully aligned everything up. Dealership option was the Sonnet side stripe, and it just had Saab, and then 3 long stripes. I haven't decided how much I want to sell this for.
Wow, so you're not even going to keep this one?
No. No. I like building them. That's
Okay.
pretty much it.
Yeah, that's my problem is I get more enjoyment out of tinkering with stuff and transforming things when I first get it.
Yeah.
You know, it could be a rusted pile of crap or it
So this is
needs a lot of work.
The
I love the
original
transformation.
engine, 46,000 miles on it. The original transmission, did not do any rebuilding. Did not redo the heads for unleaded gas.
Mm-hmm.
It runs great, does not burn oil. So it's around the $12,000 to $15,000 range.
Mm-hmm. Well, I believe it. I mean, this is an excellent example of a Sonnet, just with the small piece we've been able to see.
It's only 2,200 made total. V4s.
2,200.
3.
That like really puts it in
2,
perspective.
Yeah.
2,200.
That doesn't make it valuable.
No.
Not that many
right.
people want them.
Yeah, not just Sonnets alone, but I mean, just in general, we're losing more and more cool and rare cars every single day, wrecked, scrapped, whatever. But it's real cool that you're taking the time and effort not only to restore cars for people, for yourself, but also make the panels
Right.
and to share your knowledge. I mean, a lot of people I know that'll be watching this will greatly appreciate the effort that you're, you know, putting towards the Saab community. After I left John's shop, he wasted no time at all busting out a grinder and a screwdriver, knocking out the cancerous metal and getting to something solid to build it back up better than it was from the factory. Now here, the inner arch, you can see how it's withered away. It got definitely a lot worse, probably like a 3 to 4 inch wide section by 2 inch tall, and now it's just thin air. So he ended up building in a new arch, and while it does look kind of simple, it's rather complex. You have a couple different radiuses involved with it, but undoubtedly the absolute most complex part is the rear door section where it meets the rocker panel that was hidden by the factory rocker panel that we removed. And unfortunately, that got tremendously worse. Now, he did have to create a lot of stuff out of thin air because you think the actual metal was withered away, so there's no template to build off of. And I don't even think they make a replacement patch panel as complex as what he had to create. So a big shout out to John, incredible, talented individual that's been doing this for a long time. and was able to not only get the metal repaired, but also get things in line to send it to the next specialist, because John is a rust specialist, not a paint specialist. So he sent it off to his friend Tim, who has a close by shop who specializes in paint matching. And it's kind of a word of mouth deal. So you can't just look Tim up and get your car painted by him. You have to have some form of contact with him. So going through John got me connected with Tim, and Tim undoubtedly did an amazing job matching the very old, very sun-faded 2008 paint of the laser red in making it look original, like it never even had any rust repair whatsoever. That's going to wrap it up on the journey of fixing the rust on my 2008 Saab 9.3 Aero, my laser red car. Big shout out to my now new friend John, auto rust specialist in Columbus, Ohio. So if you're ever in the market to get your car fixed with rust, whether it's a Saab or another vehicle, metal is metal, rust is rust. He is a magician when it comes to rust repair, making things out of thin air. He doesn't even need an existing patch panel to fix it. That's what he ended up doing with my car, and he can most definitely do it for plenty other vehicles and not just Saabs. But even if you're outside of Columbus, Ohio, and you have an older Saab, say a Sonett, he makes those patch panels and can mail them out to you, which is just absolutely amazing. So definitely support those who support the channel, and especially somebody like an old school person like John, who is a Saab enthusiast through and throughout, and bringing those Saabs back to life so they remain on the roads. I appreciate you making it this far. If you haven't noticed already, I'm sitting in my 2011 Saab 9.4X Aero, this unicorn that I'm very excited to get back up and running. A lot of those parts in the back are for this vehicle. Some of them, not so much, some other projects on the channel, but I am very thrilled that I have my hands on one of these finally, and I'm very excited to get this thing back up and running. So if you're excited as well, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe for upcoming videos like this 9.4X series, and I hope to see you friends on the next one. Thanks for watching.